All right. I know you didn't join just to listen to music, right? Get this turned off. There we go. Good to be with you. Jill Moreland, thank you for being here today, too. Good to see you on here. Okay, so this is a challenging topic for me. I always enjoy teaching on this and some of the elements that I'm going to be sharing today. But I also have to that it's also very personal, uh, personal topic and challenging for me because I really do feel like this is one of those aspects of my life that I, as a leader, that I truly have had to learn the hard way. Had a lot of excellent teachers and mentors along the way, counselors, wise people to help. But this is something that I truly, truly have to work at and be very intentional about. Hence the name of our session, A Season of Intentional Rest. So I'm looking forward to sharing this. For some of you, this will be very new. For some, you may have heard elements of this if you've come to a boot camp or you've been involved in our coaching for quite some time. But I really trying to give you some very, very practical things here at this particular point in the year. So what I'm going to do for this session, as usual, is I'm going to pray to start. I'm going to share some slides with you. I'm going to take you through some teaching. I would hope that about 30 minutes or so, maybe a little bit longer, will be focused on the things that I'm just trying to share and get across to you. And then the balance of the time, I would want to focus on your questions. And most sessions, I would want to take any questions that you have on any topic, whether it's something I'm covering or not. But for those of you who've taken the time to join live today, I really would encourage you to bring up during that question time, questions and topics or things you're grappling with as I talk through here on this topic, because I do believe that it's very important and these are learnable skills. And I'll get into that. So as I'm teaching today, please take notes. Take note of areas that you'd want to ask questions or clarification. I really want to help you get the most of this time today. And I'm very curious about how you're going to be implementing some of these things, if not all of these things, in your life as a leader as well. I think it's vitally, vitally important, and it's a misunderstood topic, and it is a misapplied topic, and it is a underutilized aspect of what it means to be a leader, particularly over the long haul. So I'm looking forward to sharing this. Let me share my pray. I'll pray first, then I'll share my screen. So let me pray. Father, thank you so much for this time together and for the health and the energy to be able to do this today. And for these people who would be willing to take time and energy of their own to join. And thank you for just the teachable spirit and example of so many names that are coming across the screen here. And Father, I know that I, in myself, have so little wisdom and insight on this, but I can share what I believe I've learned from you that is wise and true and right, and that will bear good fruit in our lives. So be in my mouth and in my speaking. Help us be bold together to ask questions and be transparent as possible as we try to apply these things to our lives as well. I thank you that each individual in this session, and even those who will watch later, that each person is important to you and that you care and love deeply for them, not because of what they can do, not because of what they do in your name, not because of what they do as a part of the work that you're doing. You care and love them deeply, individually, just because you created them. And you invite them to participate in what you're doing and experience that joy and fruitfulness that comes from that. So, Father, help each person just really, if today, have a reminder of just the power of your love for us that is not based on our performance, is not based upon our achievement or results or our endurance, but instead just simply your faithfulness to us. Our value really comes from. So thank you for that this day. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, let's see here. Paul says he has to leave to go rest and pray with our loving Father and of staff. Got it, Paul. Thanks for joining at least at the start. Okay, so let me share my screen and we are going to jump into this topic here. All right. There we go. All right, a season of intentional rest. I think this is timely. That's why we wanted to do this in the month of July, because this is a time when many people are taking vacations and taking time to sort of rest and recover from the previous months and even the previous year. But this is a particularly important topic, I think, because we are still navigating our way through the pandemic. We are still reeling and suffering a bit of hangover in a lot of ways from the past 18 months of challenges due to COVID that have never been seen before in recent lifetimes. So this is an extremely significant challenge that we continue to lead through, and it will continue to be significant. This is not something that you just are going to bounce back from, I think, as a leader. A concern that I really have for a lot of leaders is I'm saying to them, hey, what's your plan for rest? What's your plan for recovery? What's your plan to endure well, in the months and years ahead? And oh, well, I have vacation scheduled, they'll tell me, or they just got back from vacation. And that's great. Vacation is restful and rejuvenating and energizing, but vacation is not a plan. It's just something to do. And so this is something I've just been very, very much concerned about and looking forward to walking you through some of the things that we teach and coach leaders on. I want to clarify the specific struggles that leaders face. I want to help you be inspired by a couple of huge and amazing examples. I want to help you think about managing stress and energy and dangers and kind of getting clear about those. I'd like to introduce or reaffirm some key self-leadership skills that really help you recover and move forward. And of course, I want to answer your specific questions and make sure you've got access to us as well. If you're in coaching, you've got probably more of us than you even want. If you're not yet in coaching, I want to make sure you know how to reach us. We're going to be focused on launching around 10 new coaching projects, I'd say, in this quarter. And some folks have even joined the call, I know, expressing interest in that. Watch out, though, separate from that, watch out for an email from Erica on our team to schedule one-on-one time with a coach. Whether you want to dig into this topic or you want to focus on specific questions about development in terms of growing giving, all of that, we try to set aside time as a team to be available and do that. So Erica will email you to help you set that up if you're interested. There's my email. I would imagine if you're on this call, you get emails from us and from me, direct phone number, and then texting. So if you're not getting regular text from me, say every week or every few weeks, I would encourage you to text me, and we use a system to manage it, but it's all me. Those go directly to my phone, and it's great to get questions along the way. I've asked people this before, but how do you know when you're burned out? You hear this word burnout, this phrase burnout all the time. The Mayo Clinic actually has a definition of this. I'm not going to go through all of this. Some of you may have seen it before, but I do find it helpful to know that there's actually very measurable, definable ways to kind of understand burnout and the condition physically and mentally of it. Do you lack energy to be consistently productive? Have you become cynical or critical at work? Do you drag yourself to work? Are you using food or drugs or alcohol to feel better or simply not feel? Have your sleep habits or appetite changed? Those are some very specific things. I love these questions, though, that Beth Moore asks from her book, Chasing Vines. She focuses more on fruit, and that you can go through seasons in your life where you've been under so much pressure for so long, and you don't have this season of recovery or these disciplines of recovery, that it affects literally your fruitfulness as a leader and as a Christian. Is my heart growing warmer or colder toward others? Am I constantly in a bad mood? Am I increasingly exhausted? Do I get fixated on offenses, or am I willing to overlook most of them? Have I become harsher or gentler over the last year? That's a huge question for me. Do I lose control easily? I dealt recently with a person, I won't obviously name names or go into details here. I dealt recently with a person that as we navigated some questions and challenges together, it became really clear that this person was struggling with some very deep things. I think probably mostly related to burnout, because these questions would have been highly relevant to that person, but unfortunately they weren't open or ready to kind of receive some teaching on that. They were just sort of stuck in this. So these questions are helpful for me, but this is what it looks like for me dealing with burnout, especially over a long period of time. My ability to love well is compromised. I start failing to keep promises to myself, certain standards that I hold to. Things just start feeling very hopeless. Sometimes even everything starts feeling very hopeless, very pointless. Those are kind of words that I could use. I feel like the well is run dry. Man, if I have to do one more teaching, I'm going to reach down in the well of my heart and I'm going to pull up, and nothing's going to be there. And that just leads to all kinds of fear and anxieties and feeling overwhelmed. So that can happen. Lacking any sense of forward movement. Man, are we even getting anywhere with this? Were we actually even making a difference? Those are all things that kind of start running in my head. It might look different for you, but I think it's helpful to get clear on that. Now, I think I want to give you two huge examples of people. One, of course, is the best example, which is Jesus, who struggled in significant ways. And I'm going to share with you some scriptures that you might be familiar with, but I'm hoping that today you'll be looking at this through a different lens. One is Jesus talking about the baptism of suffering on the cross that he has to go through ahead of him. He says, I have a baptism to undergo, and how distressed I am until it's accomplished. And the word distress there is syneko in the Greek. It's this pressed in, this pressing, there's pressures on all sides. That's what syneko means. And this is his state of being as he's pursuing what his Father has ahead of him, as he's moving toward that. Of course, we know the example from the Garden of Gethsemane. He's grieved to the point of death. And another in the book of Luke, it's in agony. His sweat's even like drops of blood. He's just so overwhelmed with the emotions of that tension. I love in Hebrews, though, although he was a son, he learned obedience from the things which he suffered. And having been made perfect, he became to all those who obey him the source of eternal salvation. Isn't that a mystery that Jesus himself was learning, being perfected, being completed through suffering? And I think that that's significant as a leader, because when we look back over the past 18 months, the pressures you faced, the questions you've had to deal with, the decisions that you've had to make that you never would have imagined that you've had to make, we have been syneko, well pressed in on, and there is clearly a hope, even reality, that we are learning things from that we're being shaped by God into the image of Jesus through those. But that doesn't mean that we have to just be a victim and keep going. We know that because of Jesus's example. Luke chapter 5 says he would often, I've emphasized some phrases here, slip away to the wilderness. I think it's interesting he didn't just slip away, he slipped away to the wilderness. He didn't just go a little bit away out into the wilderness, outside, outdoors. He was in this one in Mark, in the boat when there's a storm. Everybody's freaking out, and his disciples are completely upset. It says Jesus was in the stern asleep on the cushion. And they ask him, they wake him up, do you not care that we're perishing? Why was he asleep? Well, he was asleep because he was tired, and he was sleeping because that was an opportunity to sleep. That is an incredible picture there. He says to his disciples at one point, come away by yourselves to a secluded place and rest a while. Just modeling that. This is not like, hey, aren't we tired? Let's keep going. No, let's come away to a secluded place. Let's rest. I love in John chapter 6, they're intending to take him and make him king. It's like, if this guy is who he says he is and he's doing all these things, then he's our king. And it says he just withdrew again, as frequently, to the mountain by himself alone. And then in Isaiah, talking about the coming Messiah, we have this great picture of Jesus as well, that he's offering his back to those who beat him, his cheeks to those who pull out his beard. How many leaders on this call felt that way last year at times? And I didn't hide my face from mocking and spitting, because the sovereign Lord helps me, I will not be disgraced. But then look at this. Therefore, have I set my face like flint. So there's this resolve that Jesus had, in spite of all the difficulties, this resolve to move forward with what God has in front of him, what his Father has in front of him. And that's that idea of he set his jaw, set his face like flint. So there's this incredible example there. Now, another example, not at all on the same level, is another hero of mine, Winston Churchill. Now, depending on how big of a buff you are about history and Churchill, you may or may not know that Winston was a painter. This was a pastime that he took up rather late in life. And he actually wrote a delightful little book I would encourage you to get, called Painting as a Pastime. But it's not just about painting. It's this little book. He really gets into the challenges of being a leader. If you think about what he faced as a leader in World War II, and how ridiculously disciplined he was about going away by himself, or sleeping, or taking a nap, or painting, and other hobbies that he had. And so the book, I would really encourage you, but he had a couple things that jumped out at me. He talks about the importance of a hobby, and he says the cultivation of a hobby and new forms of interest is therefore a policy of first importance. To be really happy and really safe, one ought to have at least 2 or 3 hobbies, and they must all be real. Now, a lot of leaders, I want to pause there, a lot of leaders that we work with, and I know I was like this for years, were like, I don't have any time for hobbies. My work is my hobby. I love my work. God's in this work. Now I had some hobbies, but I had years and years of my life where I didn't engage in those at all. And the reason why is because I like my work. I'm one of those people that enjoys work and enjoy the fruitfulness that God enables me to have. But look what Winston says here. Indeed, it may well be that those whose work is their pleasure are those who most need the means of banishing it at intervals from their minds. And he mentions that the most common form of diversion for many people, particularly leaders, is reading. And I'm a reader, so that's a big way for me best vacation to me is going on vacation, sitting somewhere quiet and being able to read book after book after book. But look what he says. But reading and book love in all their forms suffer from one serious defect. They are too nearly akin to the ordinary daily round of the brain worker to give that element of change and contrast essential to real relief. So you think about that, change and contrast. What can we see in the life of Jesus about that too? Change and contrast. To restore psychic equilibrium, we should call into use those parts of the mind which direct both eye and hand. Now, many, many other people since Winston, a lot of experts have found this reoccurring pattern among many leaders. And that is that a way of recovering, gaining new energy to their mind and their body is doing something that engages both their mind, the eye, and their hands. For some, that's chopping wood. There was a great article in the Wall Street Journal a couple of years ago about how many CEOs take the time to detail their own vehicles, usually very nice, high-end vehicles. And my oldest son's into that, and so I kind of got into that. And I can't say I enjoy the work of detailing it. It's work, but there's something about having this finished product that is unusual for a leader. One director of development I know I spoke to recently about this, he likes to clean. He said, when my wife and I are on vacation, he said, I love to just start cleaning the house, organizing the house. I don't love doing it, but I love the finished product. I think there's something there. Well, for Winston, it was this idea of painting, coordinating hand and eye, and literally engaging the brain fully in something else. I've spoken in the past about this concept in recovery and rest, that it has to be active, that it's not just go on vacation and veg out, as they would say. That there's a concept of eustress, which is putting yourself under a positive form of stress, and it has a beneficial effect. And so I'm not going to take a ton of time on this, but I wanted to remind you about this visual. If you haven't seen it, I would encourage you, after you get the slides from us, after you get the slides from us, I would encourage you to review it. You might even have some questions. We could go over it further. But the idea here is that we have in us these unhealthy stress cycles, the way we respond to stress, but we can actually break that infinity loop, if you will, and create a new response, a healthy response. And we start that with looking at what are some healthy stresses that we could engage in, eustress, if you will. So I don't want to take time today to get into that, but what I want to show you instead is more of the practical aspects of what that can look like. So one of the things that I talk a lot about is you have to have a recovery plan. True burnout, true seasons of pressure, as we have been through since the beginning of the pandemic. True seasons of pressure are not something that a 1 week, 2 week, 1 month time off or whatever you might get. That doing that 1 week, 2 week, 1 month, that solves these pressures. The pressures are not solvable simply by that. For many leaders to say, oh, just stop and do nothing, just sleep, just take a nap. That will help in the near term, of course, but to truly recover requires a little bit more of a lifestyle of recovery, a lifestyle of resting at key seasons. So you have to have a plan. As I said, vacation can be part of that plan. And I encourage you to actually write your plan down. This could be an aspect of recovery. My wife took this picture and I'm almost ashamed to show it to you, but it cracked me up. This was sometime in the winter. I'd probably been duck hunting that morning. And one of our little dogs just loves to take naps. If I lay down or take a nap or something, she wants to do that. So here I am taking a nap. This could be an aspect of your recovery plan, a season of rest. This is not a season of rest. The brain does not work that way. It has to be engaged in things other than that primary plowing that a leader does. So written recovery plan, this is one that I've had to update recently. If I could be really transparent here, let me pull that off the screen. If I could be really transparent here for a minute, as you probably heard or know of by now, I had a very serious battle with COVID in March of this year. Was sick at home for a week and in the hospital for a week and another week after that, just trying to get better. Essentially all of March was COVID for me. And then all of April was recovering physically. And then all of May was recovering mentally. I'm still dealing with ongoing mental fatigue that hits me and a really violent throbbing ear ringing that comes across from time to time. Sort of part of the long COVID symptoms. And so I've had to really go back and revisit all of the practical things that I'm sharing with you today, because it's not something that I can just take a nap and be fine and oh, that's over, or I went in the hospital and now I'm better. It's something that's like a traumatic brain injury that's going to take some time. So I'm so thankful that it wasn't more serious. I am not dead, even though that would be to be present with the Lord. I'm fully recovered, but I'm not what I would consider to be completely at my best at all times. And so this is not something that I can just do a few things and it's done. I have to think about the things that I've learned in the past. What does a season of recovery look like? So that means a plan. So again, back to our slides. You don't have to have your plan look like mine. It can be written in any way you want, but I do encourage you, it has to be written down. And it helps to identify things that help you feel a little bit better. It helps you to identify things that fill you up as well as things that drain you. So you can avoid the drains, or at least know that those are a part of your life, and therefore the fills need to be an important part, more important part of your life. And then it helps to identify very specific weekly actions. So some of these you may have seen in past recovery plans when I've talked a little bit about this. Some of this is new. This is a very up-to-date plan. Now, for those of you who would say, I'm too busy with all that's going on, or the pressures are too great to take a nap, or to sleep 7 hours on average, or to have a hobby, I would say what I wish someone had said to me for years: you need to really get over yourself, because there is no way that what you are doing is so unbelievably dependent upon you that you cannot make small adjustments consistently so that you can be available over the long haul. I'm living proof of how thinking that something that's really has to take everything and big accomplishments could cause you to lose your health, or lose your family, or lose anything really meaningful to you. And our loving Heavenly Father knows that you are just flesh and I'm just flesh, and He will actually honor these tough decisions that we have to make because we are human. If He honored Jesus above every name, who was willing to step away, to not heal everyone, to go to a secluded place, to have times where He just enjoyed being with His disciples over a meal, to be at a wedding feast and do His first miracle. If He raised Jesus' name above every name, He will certainly honor us making some of these adjustments in 2021. So I encourage you to have a written plan. I also think it's important that you're aware of the danger zones. I love this: danger, do not touch. Not only will this kill you, it will hurt the whole time you're dying. These are a few that I would put in front of you. Changing your emotional state through unhealthy means, isolating yourself from the value of your spouse's input, or if you're not married, your inner circle. Forgetting to halt. HALT stands for hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Anytime you're hungry, angry, lonely, tired, if you forget you're in that state, that is a danger zone, and you can really make some poor decisions. Now, a recovery plan helps you think about sort of lifestyle in the near term, what to adjust. A growth plan really helps you identify a plan for you to continue to grow and be energized as a leader, even over years. So my wife is a gardener. She loves to see things grow. She doesn't do vegetable gardening. It's all flower gardening. God loves to see things and people grow. And this is a photo just from today of one of the flowers in my wife's garden, and another one too. I mean, just look at the beauty of this. And so reaffirming with yourself that God is interested in your growth personally as a leader, the wholeness of who you are, just as much, maybe even more so, interested in than He is interested in your plan for the organization, as important as that is, or your plan for work, or your plan for results. It's not an either or. And so this is an example. This is not mine. This is just an example of what a personal growth plan can include. Clarifying your values, your strengths, your personal vision, your weaknesses, your heroes, the things that are barriers to you at work, kind of performance barriers for you, and the consequences, and then the areas of focus that you have. So the difference between a growth plan versus recovery plan A growth plan is really about where you're trying to grow over time, yourself and your areas of focus. So self-leadership could be one of those, like in this example, and to think through, okay, daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly, what does this look like? Some people go, gosh, this is too much. It's not simple enough. It's actually quite simple once you have done the work to plan it. It's the work that's not been done before in your life. It's the thinking about this, praying about this, seeking input about it. That's the piece that actually is hard. But if you do that, you can really come up with very intentional plans for all this. Now, I want to reinforce several specific skills and disciplines, and then we're going to turn to questions. Some of these you learn through coaching. Some of these you might have heard me teach about. Some of this might be for the very first time. One thing is, when you're looking at a recovery plan, a season of rest, as I've just had to do recently with my recovery from COVID, you have to update your model week. You have to go back to, how am I budgeting my time? So recently, this is not a current one, obviously, for me. It's one from many years ago now. But recently, I've had to update. I started just like I'm sharing with you. Okay, I need to update my model week. I have got to change when my day starts so that I'm ensuring that I'm getting enough sleep so that my brain continues to heal. When am I doing my workouts then? When are meetings? And so as Erica on my team can attest to you, I've had to go back and adjust my model week to plan that out. It's not enough to say, I need to do this. I'm budgeting the time and changing my use of time. Second, it helps to have better targeting. And what I mean by that is being really clear where you want to be work-wise, in particular as a leader, in a fairly near-term fashion. And so there are a lot of different ways to do that, but one is to just pick one critical number. So, okay, in the next 6 weeks, what's the one critical number that we're focusing on in the next 6 weeks? That could be a giving number. It could be, if you're a Christian school, an enrollment number. It could be a number that measures some improvements that you're trying to make. What's the one thing? It's pretty hard to prioritize as a leader if you haven't gotten that clear in the near term. What's the one thing that actually is the most critical? That's what opens up the creativity to know what you can adjust. Then looking at, okay, here's my model week. Here's the one critical number. What can I say no to? Saying no with style, I call it. This can be very heartbreaking. Sometimes you have to do that. I love this example. It's one of my favorite examples from Greg McCown. Found a letter from E.B. White. Thanks for your letter inviting me to join the Committee of the Arts and Sciences for Eisenhower. I must decline for secret reasons. We don't have to say why all the time that we need to say no. We're just saying no. Recently, I had to say no to something we had planned. We were planning, as you probably have heard, we were planning to do a boot camp in the fall. I was really looking forward to that. Boot camps are amazingly impactful. I think there's more people interested now than ever before in coming to a boot camp with us. But a boot camp is 2 days of the most intense teaching that I do. It is not something that I can just lollygag my way through. And so I had to make a tough decision to say, I'm realizing I may not be able to be at my best for 2 days straight by October, as I'm still recovering in this plan from COVID. And we're looking at then now the first quarter of 2022 for our next boot camp. So I would not want people to experience less than all that I can give at the time. So I've had to say no to that. A fourth thing is get moving early. And I know this can cause some hurt feelings here, but I can't see your faces right now, so that probably helps. But exercise, movement is God's gift to you. Absolutely God's gift to you. And I had to learn this, again, the hardest possible way. I had not worked out a day in my life until 2013. So I was late 30s before I'd never worked out. I'd move around a little bit and call that exercise, but I'd never worked out at all. And I had a doctor, thankfully, who loved me enough and confronted me on this and said, You are not going to be able to sustain and do what you want to do if you do not find a way to make exercise a significant part of your life. And so there's a lot of things I should do a coaching sometimes just on this, but I'm living proof that someone who has never done it before and has zero interest in doing it can make this a part of their life. I'm now on year 9 of this and 3 months away from COVID, and I still have been able to get back into that. I'm 9 weeks into my rebuild, what I call my rebuild 2021 thing. A trick to it is get moving early. But if it's not early, do it midday or late, move. And I love this meme. I forgot to go to the gym this morning. It's 8 years in a row. That was me. And now it's been 8 years in a row in the gym, and now on year 9. Another good trick is, just tell yourself, I'm going to do 10 minutes, then 20, and then do 20. Just say, I'm going to get on the treadmill for 10 minutes. I'm going to go walk for 10 minutes. I'm going to go run for 10 minutes or swim or whatever. I'm just going to do 10 minutes. And what you'll find is if you do those 10 minutes, you're going to go ahead and you can do the next 20 or even longer. And then I would also say, put this to the test. This is a direct quote from me. Put this to the test. See if it's not true. No one has ever walked out of a gym and said, boy, I really wish I hadn't worked out today. No one has ever said that. And I promise you, you will not say that. So I would really encourage you. It is vital. Every piece of evidence on health and longevity shows that exercise and nutrition are more effective than any other medicinal treatment there is for some of the things that we're talking about and dealing with. Work at resting. I already mentioned this. That's what when I say I have to work at resting, what I mean is I have to have a plan. I can't just say, oh, I'm just going to rest and I'm okay. And then evaluate with some key questions. And I've given these for you to use later, but these are some key questions I use to just sort of self-evaluate where I am and how I'm doing on some of these things. Something I've started more recent years in my life is focusing on my inner dialogue. So I have written down pages and pages actually of quotes or notes to myself, and I will set an alarm and read those at least twice a day, usually 3 times a day. That's what I have learned and recommend. And this is an example of that. These are things that I just wrote to myself. I love my wife with courage, boldly allowing her to know me in my heart. I love her as Christ loves the church. I always remember, this is a big one for me, that God sets himself against the proud and goes to battle against him. So I humble myself before the Lord and give him thanks for his grace and ask him for even more grace. So I have pages and pages of these, and I will read these 3 times a day. And that literally is rewiring my thought process in these difficult times. I would leave you with this from scripture, Revelations 3:2. Jesus was speaking to the churches and said, wake up and strengthen the things that remain, which were about to die, for I have not found your deeds completed in the sight of my God. So as someone who was in the hospital with COVID and wondering if I would come out of that, as was my family, I know the same is true for you. If I'm still here, then there are deeds that are not yet completed in the sight of God. And so I need to wake up. I need to strengthen the things that we're talking about here. And I need to do that intentionally rather than just putting it off. So I'm going to turn to your questions. It's always my favorite time, and I hopefully the most valuable part of our time. So Henrik says he's on vacations and unfortunately must converse with a waiter. So that's funny. He'll listen in a little bit later. So questions from the group. You can use the Q&A box. You could raise your hand. I'll call on you. You can put it in the chat, or I'll just pick on people as well, which I always love doing. So I'm hoping you got some questions along the way. I've covered a lot here today. Let me see what a good question. Who's someone I think would be bold enough for me to pick on? Steve Blum, let me start with you. Let me see if I can hear you. I'm going to allow you to talk. Please don't be shy with questions. I know I've covered a lot, and I'd love to hear how you are thinking of applying this or clarifying questions that you have, or maybe something you just want to go deeper on. So Steve, I'm going I'm allowing you to talk. Can you accept that?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, there you are, Steve. Good to hear your voice.
Yeah, good to be with you. Thank you. Yeah,
Question or
yeah, you and I have talked about this a little bit, like in previous life and working in schools, like it was a very, very intense time. So I spent a lot of time thinking about school leaders in the midst of this and the importance of that. So in my role where I have flexibility and freedom, what I have found is the planning portion of this is incredibly important because you can go day to day and do your job and not have this clear idea of
right?
um, of what is being accomplished and when it's being accomplished, um, and then to put those specific times in is really important. And I grew up kind of in this culture of you work really, really hard and then you go on vacation. And then you come back from vacation, you work really, really hard again. And
yeah.
and in many ways, like our culture doesn't value this rhythm of work and rest, that balance. And we kind of take this great pride in working harder than the person next to you. I believe that's an evil that we have to kind of fight against. So I appreciate the reminders and then the examples, the tangibles of physical, mental, spiritual, emotional health, and then what are you going to do to put into that. I love being outside, working in the yard. I love lawn mowing. I'm just gonna. It is wonderful thinking time, and nobody's going to bother you because you have earplugs in and you have an hour and a half just to sit there and accomplish something. So
well, and you're able to look back. It's sort of like chopping firewood, so you're able to look back and see it's finished, which I think is very Winston. I didn't mention this, but Winston Churchill, painting was like that. You have a finished painting. He liked to finish paintings in one sitting if he could, or a short number.
Mm-hmm.
And he would he did a big bricklaying project at one point where he learned how to lay bricks with a bricklayer, and he would lay a certain number of bricks each day. And he had other projects like that he would personally, physically be engaged on. I mean, I think a big part of that, a pattern I've seen, is the ability to look back and see it's done, which has a lot of things in leadership. In today's world, you do not have that pleasure, that gift at the end to see that it's done. A question, though, that comes up in what you're saying, I'll turn you off mute here, but thanks for all that insight, Steve, is the planning time is key. And so what I find often is lacking is people have this fear that if I take a day to go work on this kind of plan, what's my board chair going to think, or what's my boss going to think, or whatever. And a way around that is to give them a report of that time, to say, hey, I'm blocking a time to do some planning personally as a leader. And you don't have to share with them everything. Obviously, some of them might be too personal, but to say, coming out of that time to hold myself accountable, I'd love to go over what I have planned with you. Just like saying no, I find a lot of leaders have a passive aggressive way of saying no. They're feeling pressure to do a capital campaign, and they don't know how to say no, so they just don't do a capital campaign. And then they wonder why their board is they're in conflict with their board, or their board's pushing them to do a certain change that the leader knows they're not up to that just yet, or even the school is not yet up to that. Recently, I saw a school talking about going into a strategic planning process this last school year. Now imagine that. All this going on with COVID, they want to do a 5-year strategic plan. And I said, I would encourage you to not do that. Get a group together to update your strategic plan. But there is no way you're going to have the emotional energy from your people to do a 5-year plan in the middle of hopefully once in a lifetime difficulty. So saying no directly, saying I have to figure out how to say no with style and clarity, that creates actually a culture of trust, even if there's some tension at first. That's a healthier tension than being passive. I'm just not going to go for a day, or I'm not going to do this kind of planning, or I'm not going to take on that project. I'm just not going to explain myself. So those are a couple thoughts of what you said. Here's some great questions that have come through here on the monthly think day. I started implementing this when I was a leader at Westminster, and I actually required certain team members to do it as well. I would have been open to anyone doing it, but there were certain team members that were in leadership roles that I required this of them. And what I would do is say, I need you to tell me when it's going to be. So they had to actually get it on a calendar. And I would love to get an update from you verbally or in writing afterwards at what came out of that time. So a think day is where you're really focused on one specific thing that you are having to engage your brain to really plan out, think about, get detail about, or a think day is where you're doing a long-term series of planning. So I would not want to be real strict about how you use that. It's really up to you. But the point is that the time is that used to engage your thinking in ways that no one else in your organization is going to. That's unique to your role. No one else is going to be thinking about this. And so I'm going to take an entire day on that. So you could research Bill Gates is, famous, I think, for what I think he called it a think day or month or something. He took a long period of time. Think week. That's what a think week, I think, is what he called it. It's hard for most people to take a week, but I think a day is a day, even day monthly is doable. If you can't do a whole day, do half a day. Matt asks, where do you go for your monthly think day? I encourage people to go any place that makes them feel more creative. That's usually not at home. So I know some folks will spend a whole day at a Starbucks or in a restaurant that'll kind of let them hang out. I go to, used to go to like certain restaurants, or I'd start in the morning at one and go to another one where I knew I could eat and have drinks or whatever, but they didn't mind me being there. Now I go to the Missouri Athletic Club, where I'm a member. So I've done them in tea room. There's a tea room in town that's really cool as well. So any place I can kind of feel like I can get permission, or there's implied permission to be there. The point is not where it's specifically. It would be a place that makes you feel that creativity, that you can feel disconnected from the day-to-day flow. Lisa Barlow had a comment, and then I'm going to turn over for some more verbal questions, audio questions, about struggling with being humble in the Lord, but also being daughter of the King. Does anyone else struggle with this contrast? I have to remind myself that I'm worth taking care of myself. Yes, I would say many people struggle with that. And I would say it's very, very common for people who find themselves in high responsibility roles, as leaders do, to really struggle with that, because it does take a confidence in yourself and in the Lord working in you and through you to take on some of the things that we take on. And so there can be a lot of struggle with, is it the Lord doing this, or is it me, or is it both? And am I being prideful, or am I being humble? That's a very, very normal thing, I think, for leaders to struggle with. In terms of taking care of yourself, yes, I find many people deal with this, but leaders in particular feel like they're being selfish. I know that's certainly the way I have felt, and still sometimes do, that it feels selfish to make sure I'm taking time to away from my family to go to the gym, right? When I have so little time anyway, it feels like. But what I have learned over time is, despite those emotions, that it's a trust issue. Am I trusting my Father enough to know that I am preparing myself for the next battle, that I'm ready for what He sends me? God obviously brought me through the COVID challenge. Many people were praying, no doubt about it. I wonder, as bad as it was for me, there's obviously just something weird genetically. They don't know why certain people have responded so badly. I wonder, though, what it would have looked like if I wasn't in shape. I think there's a lot of data that points to how bad COVID, can really be in terms of deaths as well. So again, it's God's gift to you, and just learning to trust that more and more, doing things for yourself. And the other trust is that if you do become prideful about it, if you do become selfish about it, do you trust that God will correct you? And that's one of the few things I'd say I've learned along the way, is that God has proven himself well able to correct me in deep, deep ways. He will snatch me off the path I'm on and put me on a different one, for sure. So I hope that's helpful, Lisa, to that, and others that might be listening. Jill says she agrees with the strategy to move early. Yeah, if you put off until lunch or dinner, great point, Jill. I'm not surprised to hear that point from you. And exercise is a great stress reliever. Honestly, when my doctor told me, he's the one that said exercise is God's gift to you. I'm quoting my doctor when he said that. And my immediate thought before the Lord was, that is the dumbest statement I have ever heard in my life. That exercise is a God's gift to me. That's just the stupidest thing I've ever heard. So put that to the test. Matt asked a good question. How many do you have in your inner circle? I haven't counted that number. I'm not good with just remembering a random number like that. I'm thinking it is, interestingly, I have this written down in that inner dialogue. They're the people whose opinions really matter to me. And it's a very short list. It's probably not more than 7, because I'm just kind of going through it in my head, Matt. So however you define your inner circle, I don't know, but that's one of the ways I kind of define it. Is there a certain, I'm a person who can worry way too much about what everyone thinks. And so it helped me to, at some point, get clear on whose opinion really, really, really matters to me, other than my Heavenly Father. And it's a short list, and that helped define that inner circle. Let me call on a few other people. We've got some time here still. Participant. Let's see. Who have I not heard of via text here? Well, let me bring on one of our coaches who I know is really working to grow in this area. She might have a good question. Stephanie, hopefully you're still with us. Stephanie Wallenberg is on this session. She might have a good question that we could all dig into a little bit too. Stephanie, can you hear me?
Yep, I'm here, Zach.
You have a question about all this?
I think it's something that I've been working on intentionally over the last, I would say, 2 years. And I don't know who asked or who stated about things being selfish, but I think that in the long run, it really, the more you take care of yourself, the better you can serve others.
Mm-hmm.
And so me, I have a little bit of a life of luxury. Like, I don't have children, and I feel like God has allowed me to have more time to serve others. Mm-hmm. But that it is really critical to take care of myself. And you can't fill, from an empty bucket.
Mm-hmm.
And so
That's right.
I do really, I think sometimes it comes across as it could be, and like you said, God will snatch you up. Like, and you said, I like the quote where you say, you never leave the gym like wishing you hadn't gone. And then in my mind, I'm like, well, as a cynic, I say, well, unless you got injured that day. But I do think that God will realign you quickly if it's becoming more for yourself than it is for others.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Intentional rest, though, is something that it's really, nowadays it's really hard to do because there's so many opportunities to continue to be plugged in, continue to be stimulated.
Oh yeah.
And, finding that quiet time with God and yourself.
Yeah, one of the,
critical.
just to piggyback on that, Stephanie, I'll put you on mute here. I think we've got time for one more question at least, but just to piggyback on your last statement there, one of the ways I sort of trick myself on that is I'll say, well, if you're smart as you think you are some days, you're certainly smart enough to figure out how to maneuver your schedule to do a think day, or you're certainly smart enough to deal with the consequences of, needing to take a nap. And so it's like, where am I going to place trust? Am I going to trust that the Lord's going to bless this? That might be hard for some people. Can you trust that God will correct you if you get too far afield? Maybe that's easier for you. Can you trust your own intelligence to figure out some of the consequences or reactions that might come along the way? Just don't. Trust that you can deal with all that easier than you can becoming so sick of the ministry that you want to leave, or do leave, or are asked to leave, which happens, as you know, all the time. So really, when there's that resistance that you feel, really think about what's at stake, that it's not just about you. It's about, am I going to be able to be available as long as this, this place is for me? And people will say, oh, well, God will move you on when it's time to move you on. That, no question about that. But I've been doing this long enough to know that we all do stupid things. We all can find ourselves in a situation where we no longer have the privilege of being in that role. We're invited to go lead somewhere else. And God certainly works through all that, but that does not mean that that's not a very real outcome of poor choices along the way. Judy had a good thought there, but maybe she's got a question. Judy Burrell's just a delightful leader and lady, and it's been working with us and coaching for quite some time. I'm gonna put you on, Judy, if you're still there. Hey, do you have a question?
Wow. Timely. And I know I've been dealing with exhaustion at the end of last year. I think we don't realize what COVID did. As many of us were stepping up, working harder, doing those wartime priorities. And I was ignoring all my symptoms, the headache and all that, and been trying to budget my time better and block time, but still a lot of things coming at us.
Yes.
And especially in that halt mood when you're exhausted and you get one more pow. But I love what you said about this inner circle and picking up that phone, because that has been with Christian women, which is hard to find, that can help you think outside of where you are at that moment. For me, that's been critical, to have this inner circle of Christian women that I consider leaders, that I can pick up the phone when you're in those very pressing moments.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great point. Yeah, Judy, I've got one more question I want to get to before we go. Dawn, I just realized I was missing your question. But Judy, let me mute this here real quick. Judy, your one point you're making there about the not realizing the true impact of COVID on you, as a leader. That's one of the reasons why I'm pushing so hard on this right now, because this isn't something you just bounce back from. Go away on vacation, come back, you're still going to be operating at a low level of exhaustion from this. And so there's just no quick fix. It's more of a lifestyle. It's not a work-life balance. A friend of mine calls it a work-life blend. That might be a good way to think about it. But the idea here is not that it's work versus it's personal. It's just wherever you go, Judy, anyone else here, you are there. It's just you there and the Lord. It's not the work you versus the home you versus the family you. It's just you. And so this journey, saying, God, help me plan and help me make adjustments to how I navigate these seasons, because I'm not worried about anyone in this session and your willingness to dive in when it's hard. That's not the problem. That is not the problem for most leaders, especially if they're involved with us in any way. They're willing to do whatever it takes. That's not the question. The question is, what are you doing when it's not all that it takes? And what are you doing as a lifestyle, just as we see with Jesus? Again, if he could fulfill as our example, if he could fulfill this high calling that his father gave him, and still we see these patterns in his life, then certainly we can. And yeah, what we've been through as COVID is hard. Is it as hard as what Winston faced in World War II? I don't think so. I don't know. Certainly it hasn't been that way for me. So if he was able to somehow have these patterns, that maybe it actually enabled him, that it was part of the enablement of God, the grace of God in his life, certainly as we see in Jesus, to actually achieve what God has put in front of him to achieve. Don, if you're still with me, I know we've got to wrap up. Don asked a great question. Don Walker, in your recovery plan, weekly actions, what does 50 minutes is an hour meeting? What that means is that I try not to do anything for an hour. This call has lasted an hour, but I try to avoid hour meetings, hour work on a project. I treat 50 minutes as an hour, or even 45 minutes as an hour. I learned that as a musician very early on in practice, that do 50 minutes, 45 to 50 minutes of practice, and then take a break for 10 minutes, walk around, eat a snack, do something else, and you can keep sustaining. So you know, again, it's that disengaging and having that discipline. And I can, if I don't, just like in our meeting today, if I'm not really cautious, then it could just go hour, on and on and on. And then I wonder why I'm not recovered. So I hope this is helpful. If you had a question you didn't feel like you could answer or ask, I'm sorry that I didn't get to answer, please let me know, shoot me an email. I might even be able to shoot you a video back on that. Thank you so much for your time. I'll let you get to your next meetings, and we'll follow up with the recording and the slides of all this as well. So appreciate y'all so much. Bye now. Thanks, Jill.